Thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining this talk today. I'm so glad to be here, invited by people that I admire from long ago. You know that, and to have the opportunity to talk to you the other day at Black Hat and share ideas and share experiences about building software, but also building a company behind open source is great, and also very happy to be here and share everything that we know and we have learned building Prowler. And let me do this. So I'm Tony. I'm from Spain, but I lived 7 years in Atlanta, Georgia. So you can realize with my accent, right? My southern accent. I have southern accent because I'm from the south of Spain, not for Atlanta. I worked there in Atlanta for an open source company called Alfresco. They were in the UK, they were in Bay Area, but also they started having headquarters in Atlanta. Working for them, I realized that the cloud was something amazing, but at the same time, something very greenfield in terms of incident response, digital forensics, but overall hardening, hacking and hardening. And before that, I worked for services companies related to open source and security. I've done forensics, I've done mostly hardening and pen testing in many different companies. Actually, you can find on my GitHub some scripts that I started doing some research about cloud forensics that I'm going to talk in a minute. This talk is mostly about what we have done and experiences building Prowler. Prowler is an open source tool platform now to detect misconfigurations, security posture management, and a few other things like threats for AWS, Azure, Microsoft 365, Google Cloud, Kubernetes. Also, we do infrastructure as code scanning. We do LLM scanning, and also, since it's very easy to extend, people from Korea has added their own cloud services. But before I go further, I wanted to clarify something that is important for the community here. Is that open source cloud security and the community is not the same as open source security. And why not? Because everybody, I mean, we're all working, right? Because cybersecurity is cool, we have all a job, and we have a good pay, and all that stuff, right? But the point is, when you have open source, pure open source with Linux or with whatever else, you may have that at home, and you are not paying anybody, only probably your electricity or whatever. But in the cloud, it's totally different. You are not touching anything. You are working with APIs. You are working with third-party APIs, the cloud service providers APIs, actually. So you have to pay those. So since the economic transaction is in place all the time, that is why it's not pure open source in the sense of the freedom or free or you know, or no money related. In the cloud, there is always money, so that is also important when you build anything related to the cloud. I like to clarify that for nothing special, but because the open source itself is beyond the free part, right? So in the last years, and that is one of the reasons I started Prowler, it was like when you start working in the cloud, as I said, everything is an API. There is nothing that you have to touch or anything. And everything can be automated. Of course, you can do a lot of ClickOps, but that is a bad practice. You know, when you go to the AWS console or Azure console, you click, you create virtual machines, you know, you create services, firewalls, everything, and it works. But that is hard to maintain over the time. And it's also hard to fix, hard to harden, or even hard to pen test. So that is why I started writing and doing my own researches about automation and automation of forensics or incident response. You can find some of my talks here in the SANS Cloud Security Summit, and also in different talks over the last years. Everything. So I think this is 2017, 2016, or something around those years, and pretty much 10 years later, it's exactly the same. Perfectly valid, everything on this. And that is a little bit of a shame, but it's also a little bit of an opportunity, right? Because there is a lot to do in cloud. Actually, there was a company called Kado Security that they created something to automate forensics and incident response in the cloud. And not even after a year of funding the company, they were acquired. So it's a very hot place to be. Also, I have a repo that you can see here about how many other tools, open source tools related in this case for AWS. I started only for AWS, but now even with Prowler, but now we do pretty much any cloud or major cloud provider. So with that said, to put everything in context, something that I started doing that after this, AWS and many other companies, they have done an advanced version of this very weird or complex workflow. This is everything that you have to follow for a proper incident handling. In this case, is AWS, but it's valid for pretty much any cloud. Everything that you have to take into account. Actually, that was presented at Black Hat and DEF CON as well. Something that is not very common to see is also everything that you have to get as an evidence in the cloud. Again, this is not traditional digital forensics where you put everything in a zip bag, or you have to preserve the evidence and the chain of custody or everything like that. But it's different. It's about getting software in the proper way and try to not to go to the court, because it's going to be hard to explain a judge CloudTrail. It's hard. But there are many different things to take into account when you do assets acquisitions in the cloud. So what Prowler does in that regard? So Prowler is a CLI tool, but it's also a server and a scanner. We have categories, and one of the categories is forensics ready. What we do here is a bunch of checks that they see if you are ready for an incident. You have all the most important services and logs around those services and logs around your applications to see if you are ready in the case you have a security incident. This is fast forward. Prowler is a little bit slower than that, because it's not about Python or about Go or whatever. It's about the APIs of the cloud provider. In this case, see, you see everything, and we give different formats of the output, and also a very easy HTML file with a lot of different filters to see everything that you have to have enabled in the case of an incident. I'm showing here probably only 70 checks results, but we have more than 1,000 controls or checks around all the supported providers. So that is just a quick demo about what we do, for you to know what we are talking about when we talk about Prowler. Because in the cloud, a lot of different things can go wrong, right? Not only in the cloud, in life in general, but something that I also always wanted to do when I started Prowler was to provide a tool for the low-hanging fruit, which is always important, but also to be able to extend that tool for more complex attacks or even defense techniques. And something that I was always pissed, not only when I started Prowler, but when I started all other open source projects in general, was that the need of having open source to solve the most important problems. And then, of course, make a business around that if you want, but make sure that it's not only the good tools, they not belong only to the people that has the big money, right? In 2006, I was working for a big telco company in Spain, the most important one in Spain, and I was in the security team, in the SOC, next to the people that was doing network access, the Juniper. Remember Juniper? It's still alive, right? Juniper is the network access when you connect your DSL or even fiber into your carrier, you authenticate somehow into a Juniper using the radius protocol. I then said, well, there is no open source for this. And I created my own Juniper that is called PHP Radmin, because I wanted people to be able to put security, proper network security into their needs. I mean, basically is you don't have to pay a fortune for Juniper licenses, which is fine. It's totally fine. I don't have anything against that, but I wanted to provide that security or that kind of level of security with certificate management and all that stuff to everybody. And that is something that I wanted to do also with Prowler. Nowadays, there are very good platforms like Prisma Cloud, like Wiz, like Lacework, even Datadog, or many other companies, Orca. They have beautiful platforms and very powerful ones, but they are also very costly, which is totally fine again, but I wanted to provide something for everybody. And that is why I did Prowler, and that is why I went through the most important cloud security threats and attacks, which is very common misconfigurations, right? You expose an S3 bucket and you don't even know it because you don't know about the configuration bits or whatever. IAM vulnerabilities, of course, IAM is very, very, very challenging in the cloud. It's important to take that into account. APIs, everything is an API, so if you don't take care about the API security, you are done. Exfiltration, data breaches, of course, that is happening every day if you don't take care of your exposed resources, etc. Monitoring and logging. So these top 5, this is what happens in the cloud all the time. Nothing else. I mean, a lot of things can happen, but this is what happens in, probably 85, 90% of the time. So you can use Prowler to prevent this the same way that you use Prisma Cloud, let's say. So that is what I wanted to provide. Something that at least the most important things are covered. And the thing also, the most important point here is that with open source, from the need to the value is like minutes. You download the software, run it, that's all. Or you go, now with a SaaS platforms, as we do have a SaaS platform as well, it's even also 5 minutes. But that is, time to value is like immediate. You don't have to go through procurement processes, long purchases and all that stuff. So, but what problem, in addition to those major cloud security issues, what questions are we trying to answer when you are doing, or just one-time assessment, or you are doing continuous monitoring? So what do I have? That is the most common issue in the cloud. So we have multiple regions. In many cases, those regions are enabled, and you don't even know. And somebody started an EC2 instance with a port 80 with a CAPS driver listening and vulnerable in Singapore. And you don't realize until you see the bill, right? So what do I have? Where is my data? It's because the cloud is not just the cloud, it's something that you don't know. There are regions, so you put your data somewhere, but sometimes you don't know it. In Europe, they are talking all the time about sovereign cloud and all that stuff, and sometimes you are doing assessments and you say, okay, your sovereign knowledge is in a bucket in Oregon, for example. So bad thing. So because they are not familiar with the way the cloud works, right? In the cloud, everything is ephemeral. Well, not everything, but a lot of things are ephemeral, right? Like if you run serverless, you run a Lambda function, you run containers or auto-scaling groups, etc. You have to take care of those resources because eventually you are vulnerable, right? IAM is very, very complex, and this is probably the major reason that the cloud has security issues, because IAM is very, very difficult to learn and to take into account. Third parties access to your resources. When you give third-party access, like when you give Prowler access to your cloud infrastructure, how important or how broad is that access, right? What do I have to change now? the priority. Now with AI, this is easier a little bit because you give contact to Prowler, and Prowler can tell you, hey, do this now, and do this tomorrow, and over the next 3 weeks, do this or that. And tomorrow, next week, 3 months, and to know if I'm under an attack. That is very hard also to know. Of course, we have in AWS, for example, Guard Duty, or we have Security Hub, but even you have to enable that. Also, I wanted with Prowler, you don't have to enable anything. Run Prowler, and Prowler is going to tell you what's going on, right? It's not like a service that you have to enable and then pay for it. It's run it, and that's all. And am I ready for an incident, as we have seen in the demo before, right? So all that stuff that is very, very hard to answer, and I won't say that we answer perfectly all of them. We try, and we are improving Prowler every day. But those are the most important questions that everybody doing a one-time assessment or continuous monitoring is asking all the time, right? So that is why we wanted, as I mentioned before, the open cloud security. We wrote an the Open Cloud Security Manifesto. You can find it in opencloudsecurity.org. Basically, it's a way to tell everybody, yes, we are fine with all the platforms and SaaS platforms as we have, right? We have one. But if we want the cloud to keep growing, we have to provide proper open source and proper tools. Not only if you have enough budget, you are going to feel secure in the cloud, because you can buy those very expensive products. So we have to deliver more and more quality cloud security software with open source licenses. So that is why I'm here, because of Prowler, right? Prowler is an open source platform for all the major cloud providers and beyond the cloud providers, because now we can plug different tools inside Prowler and scan other stuff. We also added recently Oracle Cloud, infrastructure as code. That means that you can scan Terraform, you can scan CloudFormation. Are you familiar with Terraform or CloudFormation? When you want to, the templates that you want to use for infrastructure, to deploy infrastructure quickly and with automation. We do checks, which are the detections, but also remediations that we call fixers, and compliance frameworks. Compliance is hard. Sometimes it's a false sense of security, so we don't usually love compliance, but we have to be there because people pay for compliance, right? They don't pay for security. Sometimes they only pay for compliance because they have to comply with something. And we have defined a pretty easy way to map a regulation requirement to a technical need, from any regulation to any technical detail. It's like requirements to checks, basically, right? It's like, okay, PCI DSS. You have to have everything encrypted at rest. Okay, encryption at rest is different. I mean, it's the same on all cloud providers, but it's different based on the services. So we did that mapping very straightforward in a JSON file. Yeah, it's very easy to customize, create integrations, all that stuff. And Prowler is the CLI, but also it's a SDK, a cloud service, an app that is the server where the cloud service is based on, an API. Prowler Hub is our knowledge base with checks and everything for you to learn about cloud security. Lighthouse is our AI chatbot, and that is on top also of our MCP. If you are familiar with Cloud Code or Visual Studio Code, etc., you know that you can plug an MCP. So we have an MCP where you can do pretty much anything that you can do with Prowler or with any cloud, and security-related tasks with the Prowler MCP. You can find everything with Apache license here. I don't know if I have 6 more minutes. Yeah. Well, at this point, Prowler is probably based on ossinsights.io. I don't know if you are familiar with that website. You learn a lot about open source projects. We are the world's most widely used open source for cloud security with 36 million. Now it's 1 million downloads per week. It's a lot, and probably that is because some automation somewhere, because everything is coming, or mostly everything is coming from Amazon ECR. So people does a lot of automation in their pipelines with Prowler. Well, I'm going to jump over this. Well, now we are a company, but it's still, of course, everything that we do, and you can see here is open source. But as a reference, if you are building open source, the good thing about building open source is that you have to have fun. You have to be learning something. Like Joe, Joe said before, is like, even if it doesn't work, but I had fun, you know? And that is why I started Prowler, is because, okay, I want to know everything about S3 security. So that is why I wrote the checks for S3, or everything about security groups. Security group is like, in the console, is like opening and closing ports, inbound and outbound. But it goes beyond that sometimes. Not only for protecting services, but also depending on if it's a public subnet, it's a private subnet, it is the connection, if connection tracking or not. It's like playing with IP tables in Linux, but with an abstraction layer on top. So, but you need to know everything below in order to understand what is configuring through an API at the end of the day. So that is the good thing of building your own tools, right? And over the years, I was keeping up with the pace. I joined AWS, then I left AWS because I didn't have time to keep up with Prowler, and I started the company, and we raised money. So something also important when you write your own open source for you, but also for others over the time, is to make it very easy to use. So at the beginning, Prowler was a bash script. And actually, it was the version 1, version 2 was a bash script. And it was a nightmare. But it was very easy to use because it was green if you had everything good, and red if you had something to fix. But it was also very easy to run on pretty much everywhere. Now it's Python, it's even easier. But with the proper permissions, you can scan pretty much everything. And also, you can enrich your findings with Shodan or other integrations if you want. And then I'm going to talk about this in a bit, but we created our own CSV with a mapping. So whatever you scan with Prowler, the outputs are going to be exactly the same. So if you send your findings to a SIEM server or any visualization tool, you have to configure just once, and you see everything in the same way, which makes very good for integrations, right? Either Splunk or Elasticsearch, whatever, you name it. So, and now this is all that we are building. So the whole Prowler solution, is open source. It's like, okay, we have the core, the platform itself, that we do cloud security monitoring, AI security monitoring, because AI security is cloud security. AI, what is AI? Data, most of the data is in the cloud. APIs, that they are in the cloud in most cases, and GPU. And of course you can buy GPU, but most of the GPUs are in cloud providers. So that is why AI is still cloud security. Now this is the most important things that we are building now. This is to get more insights about the relations across clouds and inside cloud providers to get attack paths, something that you only can see in paid products, and we are building that open source. Yeah. That is how it works. You can install Prowler, and then we have different categories that you have seen in the demo. So you can run categories across all the providers and get specific insights, but out of the box with Prowler. And that is very important because it's probably the most comprehensive tool for this. Out of the box, Prowler runs across all the regions that you have and all the services that you have. So it takes more time, but it's also more comprehensive. And at the end of the day, in the cloud, we are not working with real-time stuff, not always. In most cases, is eventually consistent, right? So you run a process, and then you get the results over the seconds or the minutes, okay? So that is as easy as you can see here. So what are the overall challenges building Prowler? First, finding formats. So you have to make sure a finding is always consistent across all the providers, everything that you scan. So think of Prowler like the Nmap, like Nmap for ports or for operating systems, for network scanning, but for the cloud. At the end of the day, Nmap, whatever you scan, Linux, Windows, or whatever, the output is the same. So that is why we try to do with Prowler as well. We use Python for checks, of course, and OCSF. JSON format is a standard for findings. This is the Amazon security finding format that is dying, and other standard formats. We started with our own JSON, with our own CSV, but and also for compliance frameworks. Again, this is not something that we do for pure security, but also because people is asking always about, okay, tell me the level 2 of CIS, whatever. So we adopt the most important compliance frameworks, and we allow others to create their own, like the Korean government, South Korea government created their own KISA, it's called KISA or something, and it's in Korean and in English, in Prowler. And also, when it comes to what to scan, remember every cloud provider has different ways of organizing their clouds. It's like accounts, or organizations, in some cases is subscriptions, or in Google is Google Cloud, they call them projects. So that is sometimes is a little bit crazy. Now in Oracle Cloud that we added last week is called Scope or something like that. Well, it's different. Namespaces, every cloud provider has different ways. And also mapping all that stuff is very challenging. But for example, in Kubernetes, you cannot map Kubernetes regions, but we put the namespace into the regions field. Just at least you don't miss data, right? Sacrifice speed by scope. In the cloud, as I said, not everything is atomic. You don't need to write anything atomic. People say, okay, you could have done it in Go because Go is faster. And I say, for what? For the cloud, it's probably not needed. You don't need to be very, very fast, regardless the programming language. This is an example of what we went through to map our CSV across different providers. Like, okay, account email, partition. Not everything, every cloud provider has a partition. A partition is a dedicated infrastructure in the cloud. For example, to give you an idea, AWS has the commercial partition, but also GovCloud, China, or even the isolated event data centers that they use the same APIs format, but are totally different and isolated and separated environments. In Prowler, something that also we did from the first day, it was very easy to run Prowler and possible even in isolated partitions. So guys over there are using Prowler. So some mistakes and some successes that we had was, okay, at the beginning I did everything in Bash because I didn't know Python. And it was fun because I was just playing around until I realized that I had 3,000 stars on GitHub. And I was like, oops, this is starting being something serious. Add resources context, something that we are adding now, because in the cloud, without context, it's hard to have proper findings. The information that you are gathering when you pull information from the cloud, I was very targeting specific resources and configurations instead of doing everything at the same time, which is now way better in Prowler. Persistency, now we do have database, we didn't have at the beginning. Visualizations, everybody loves visualizations, right? You go from the advanced users, if you add visualizations, good dashboards, reporting, you get all the users. And now, since version 4, we have all that stuff. Also, in open source, even for cloud security, it's hard to have telemetry. We don't have telemetry. we made a mistake with a version check. So you know the -- version is like, hey, you have a new version, upgrade. And we added that with a mistake. I mean, because we were checking the version even without -- version. And we had a call from people, government people, to say, hey, you have a ping bug somewhere. It was like, no, it's only to check the version. And we had to remove that. Not even to check the version is well seen from others or even governments. And of course, we did very well to choose Apache license. That allowed me also to keep working on Prowler when I started working for AWS. Using everything as a standard in open source, being very active with your own community, responsive, add features, documentation, be with the community, all included. Prowler is a huge package now because it does a lot of things, but you install it once and you have it all. Compliance, starting with CIS. CIS is very basic, but it's very good because people start with something and they used to start with CIS level 1 and then level 2 and then beyond. And the CLI for integrations is also very, very convenient. And of course, if you have an open source project and you have some users, being consistent, having consistency over the years is key. Is key for that. So I didn't even know that I was going to have a company with Prowler, but I guess being consistent on adding features and being on top of the users and the community, understanding the pain points and implementing them, those solutions made the trick. And of course, adding remediations into the code, infrastructure as code, in Terraform, etc., but also in runtime if you are under an attack or in a rush. I think that's all, the resources for if you want to know more about Prowler. And I'm open for questions. Thank you.